Let's move on to have our spirits lifted even further by Joe Baines, who's got a question on defence.
Given the rather critical coverage in the Times last week of our campaign in Afghanistan, does the panel think that we know what we're doing there? And if not, what should we do?
I was impressed with David Cameron's statement on Afghanistan yesterday, I think it was, in Parliament. I think that it has been a campaign of 10-year duration where the objectives have shifted in an alarming fashion. And for my own part, I have always believed that we were right to go there initially, partly because of our alliance with the United States, and partly because it was quite clear that Al-Qaeda was training people, insurgents in that country who were a direct threat to this country's interests. So on a conservative view of foreign policy, I felt that our interests were under threat from that part of the world. And I haven't changed my view on that, although my view has been challenged by the changing objectives that we have witnessed. And I don't think it's the job of British Armed Forces to go about too much nation building, desirable though that is. I mean, I would be the first with an international development hat on to support nation building in those parts of the world, but that is not the job of our armed forces, except insofar as it is a requirement for a precondition for our exit, to leave that country in a state where it can manage its own security.
While at YouGov, we did a lot of research in the region from 2003 till today. I think it still continues in the company. I've stepped down for the UN, for the coalition, looking at the propensity of young men to be attracted to the brand of terrorism. You can't do anything about the guys at the edges, obviously, because they're, as the military would say, there's a kinetic solution to the ones that are over the line. But there is several examples or case studies of where it has succeeded, and it is called the Petraeus doctrine, i.e. when Petraeus went into the Sunni triangle in Iraq, that's when you've begun to see a solution emerging to the insurgency and to terrorism in that part of the world. And the way it worked, which I saw firsthand, and this is the challenge for us, and it should form part of the Strategic Defence Review, it should form a bigger debate between joined-up thinking between Foreign Office, International Development and the Ministry of Defence, and I'm glad to see all three went together to Afghanistan, because what I saw working was when the money actually made its way to the decision maker. In the case of the Americans, it went to the Department of Defense, and they were able, after the battle, they were able to win the battle for hearts and minds and begin to create communities that were sustainable, i.e. making people in that area, young men, feel that it's much better to put down the Semtex and the bombs and actually take part in the community. And the community itself would shun the ones that wouldn't want to play ball in that sense. Now, that is a long and hard road to get there, and it's a very expensive exercise. I can tell you that the amount of resources that the Americans have channeled to this are enormous. I don't know whether we have the capability to channel a similar sort of resource, but a starting point would be to say, how does Foreign Office, International Development and Ministry of Defence work together? Because at the moment, when you talk to them on the ground, it doesn't really happen.
If you must plan a war, it's always good and advisable to open the history books. Generally, wars have happened in places before. As we know, notably, Hitler failed to do that and lost the Second World War when he advanced on Russia. And if you open the history books on Afghanistan, the history is not very promising. The first Anglo-Afghan war, we lost an entire army under Major General Elphinstone in the 1950s. The second Anglo-Afghan war, I recall, was a messy draw. 1850s, wasn't it? Yeah, the 1850s. Major General Elphinstone lost 10,000 people and only a vicar escaped to tell the tale. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known what had happened. It had been like the mysterious lost Roman legion in Scotland. Which vanished 2,000 years ago. As Fraser will probably know more about their whereabouts.
Skewed them all.
And the second Anglo-Afghan war, my recollection is that ended in a draw. The third Anglo-Afghan war, I think, ended when we paid them off. which was another plan floated more recently. Afghan experts tell me with some sort of waggishness, the thing you've got to understand about Afghanistan, Charlie, is, well, the tribes there, they're tribes, they live a tribal way, and their pastime is to shoot each other, with one exception. And that is when someone from outside turns up and they shoot them instead. And there is an issue there, that the way Afghanistan has been run and has operated over a long period of time has been a very different culture to ours, and they have been very strongly nationalistic when put under pressure from outside, as the Russians also found out when they went into Afghanistan as a superpower and lost. So my general view on Afghanistan is, don't stay there. If you're going to do an operation, have a clear mission, a clear objective, do it and get out. To stay there, as we have done, is a thankless task.
For most people, it is a war we're fighting in a far-off place where many tens of our soldiers are being killed, now several hundred, and there's no real payback because it's invisible in the sense that, you know, we're not seeing the terror on our doorstep that we might do. And that's a very difficult, if they weren't there, and that's a very difficult argument to communicate. And I think the last few years, that gap has widened, so people are very uncertain of what the real point of it all is. But we then have two questions, you know, which are the real political questions, which is, you know, what is the gain that we need to make to really justify the lives that have been spent, really, all those people that have given their lives, and what is the alternative? And I think probably David Cameron has come out strongly backing the troops, doubling their attendance allowance, and actually now raising the prospect of, you know, getting to a point of handing over in the sense of, you know, getting to a level of security where we can say, well, we've, you know, won some gains that are actually valuable to the level, to the security of this country. However, I feel very sceptical about how secure and long-lasting this gain will be. You know, I think that you know, it is a very messy situation as you mess with an ecosystem of a far-off place that we don't understand very well. You know, it's very difficult. I think, you know, we need to stand with the people that we've sent out there. We need to have objectives that are attainable, communicate why we're doing them, and bring them back as soon as reasonably possible.
The day we went into Iraq, we lost Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah.
We had the momentum. There was quite a lot of civilian support. I don't know whether NADHIM would be able to show that in polling. And there was a regional momentum behind us. And the day we went into Iraq, everything changed. I was working at the Centre for Defence Studies, and when you started to look at what the MOD was doing, suddenly all eyes off Afghanistan, all eyes on Iraq. Once we lost that momentum, we ended up with corrupt government, we ended up with a lot of interference from neighbours, and we lost the confidence of the people. And ultimately, the only exit that we have is once the people feel confident in their government. Now, I can't say that I've been out there and you've got better information about what intrinsically the people feel about their government, but until they feel confident about their government, and that I don't believe will be anytime soon, we will not be able to point to that much success. My personal feeling is that we were there to address Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda left a long time ago. And whether one looks at Central Asia, you look at Somalia, you look at Yemen, that's where many of these people go. They don't need a nation. I mean, this is our madness in many ways. We think these people are located, and you know, they've got a little capital city and they've got all their little tents there. They pick them up and they walk, and they can go to any crisis country that we can think of. So the Al-Qaeda issue is no longer. Now we are hitting the Taliban, some of which are very deeply unpleasant, others who, you know, as we've tried to do, are tempted or feel that that's an economic opportunity for them. I think it's a very, very difficult war to say that we have won or lost, and I hope that we can find a dignified exit. I'm just not sure we're going to be able to point to that, you know, the success sort of pointers that will make us feel that we've really achieved something, I'm afraid.
So Joe's original question, what are we doing in Afghanistan? The whole panel is agreed that this is a very difficult question to answer.